Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is
Sea level rise. It's been the subject of myth, legend, and pop culture for millennia. It's going to be one of the major destructive effects of global climate change. So naturally, it's something that makes deniers do and say crazy things. Here's a denier talking point that you often hear. This time, the source is Fred Barnes on Fox News.
Remember the difference between Al Gore and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change of the United Nations. Al Gore says over the next century, sea level rises 20 feet. This panel on climate change says, well, maybe 17 to 23 inches.
Did Al Gore really say that? Let's go back to the tape.
If Greenland broke up and melted, or if half of Greenland and half of West Antarctica broke up and melted, this is what would happen to the sea level in Florida.
So Gore didn't really put a time scale on this rise. He simply said, if this melts, here's what you get. You mean Fox News got it wrong? Well, I'm shocked. The way I like to sort these issues out is to go to the source documents. Fred Barnes mentioned the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which he clearly hasn't read himself, but we can. Here's the graph on expected sea level rise. And here's the number he's talking about, the expected maximum sea level rise according to the IPCC for the coming century. And guess what? The 23 inches number is correct. 0.59 meters equals 23 inches. So what's up with that? Did I miss something? Should we really be concerned if that's the worst that could happen? Let's go back to that graph. There was some fine print there. Maybe it will shed some light. Right. It says model-based range excluding future rapid dynamical changes in ice flow. Wait a minute. What is a rapid dynamical change in ice flow? To answer that, we need to take a look at what scientists are observing on the ice sheet itself. Every summer on the Greenland ice sheet, the snow begins to melt. It collects in lakes like these on the surface of the ice. Over the last several decades, the area of the ice sheet where melting occurs has been expanding, and scientists have observed an increasing number of these meltwater lakes popping up over a wider area. And then sometimes they seem to disappear completely within the space of a few hours. Water is always looking for the lowest place, and when it finds a crack or fissure in the ice, these lakes can drain completely into the lower depths of the ice sheet. But scientists believe the meltwater doesn't just refreeze lower down in the glacier. A significant stream seems to be working its way down to the bedrock and creating a lubricating layer at the base of the ice. This causes the ice sheet to move, change, and flow in an accelerated way. This is just one of the mechanisms that will give you a rapid dynamical change in ice flow. The physics of this are not yet understood and cannot be reliably modeled. That's why the IPCC left them out of the report. They did not feel confident in predicting that, so they simply left it out. So the IPCC estimates include only the input from the thermal expansion of oceans as they get warmer and the input from alpine glaciers. There is no estimate of the impact of changes in the planet's ice sheets where the largest amount of ice by far exists. The Antarctic ice sheet contains over 90% of all the ice on the planet, and we don't know nearly enough about how it may behave under increased warming. What we do know from looking at the past is that when ice sheets begin to melt, they sometimes move in unpredictable, rapid jumps. 20,000 years ago, the planet came out of the last ice age, and a warming was kicked off by changes in the planet's orbit and rotation angle, and sea level rise started out gradually. But around 14,000 years ago, something happened, we don't know what, that caused the ice sheets to suddenly accelerate. And within a few hundred years, sea level rose by 75 feet. It was called Meltwater Pulse 1A. We need to know more, but we have every reason to believe that the same dynamics are at work in the Antarctic ice sheet today. In light of this, the U.S. Geological Survey recently released a study on ice sheet dynamics, and this is what they said. The inclusion of these processes will likely lead to sea level projections for the end of the 21st century that substantially exceed the projections of the IPCC report. Another recent and widely quoted peer-reviewed study put a more specific number on the expected rise. This very credible estimate came to 0.8 to 2 meters by the end of the century, although many other outcomes are possible. That's 2.5 to over 6 feet, folks. With a sea level rise of that order, we're looking at an unprecedented disaster that will displace up to 100 million people. It means that sometime in the middle of this century, sea levels start rising from 6 inches to a foot every decade. And if the ice sheets begin to move at that pace, they're not going to stop. We will be committing the planet to much higher rises. James Hansen, the leading atmospheric scientist at NASA, recently put it this way.
There's enough carbon dioxide in these fossil fuels to take us back to where the Earth was before there was any ice.
In other words, with a business-as-usual scenario, as the various climate feedback mechanisms kick in, we will be crossing a tipping point and committing the planet to an ice-free state. On an ice-free Earth, sea levels would eventually, over time, be over 200 feet higher.
Senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall, for he that gets hurt will be he who has stalled.